You ever have one of those weekends where all you wanted was peace, and somehow you end up smack in the middle of a neighborhood war you didn't ask for? Yeah, that was me 2 Septembers ago, standing beside a green tent on the shore of Echo Pine Lake, holding a mug of coffee in one hand and a verbal eviction notice from the HOA president in the other. She said, "Remove that tent or I'm calling 911." Loud enough for the squirrels to file a noise complaint. Her name was Deborah Hall, HOA president, power walker, and self-proclaimed guardian of community aesthetics. I'd barely finished staking down the last corner of my tent before she came barreling down the trail in a white golf cart, sunglasses glinting like she was about to serve me a warrant. Now, for some context, this wasn't some public park. This was my own lakeside property. I'm a freelance writer, mostly magazine and blog work, and sometimes I need to unplug, get off grid, let nature do the healing. So that weekend, I brought my tent instead of staying inside the cabin, just to be closer to the water, you know? Hear the loons at dawn, right with that cool pine breeze in your hair. But apparently, Deborah didn't see it as a tent. She saw it as an eyesore, a threat to civilization as she knew it. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" she asked, her hands on her hips like she was ready to hand out citations. Setting up camp? On my own land," I said, a little confused, a little amused. "This violates the community's aesthetic guidelines," she snapped. "We can't have people pitching tents willy-nilly like it's Woodstock." I laughed. Shouldn't have. She didn't. Now look, I'm not a guy who picks fights. I believe in neighbors getting along. But something about Deborah's tone, it wasn't concern, it was control. She wasn't quoting bylaws. She was quoting herself. And when I asked her to show me the specific rule I was supposedly violating, she just said, "I'm the president." That's enough. That was when I realized I wasn't dealing with a neighbor. I was dealing with a narrative. And in her version, I was the villain. I went back inside the cabin, fired up my laptop, and pulled up the HOA regulations. Took me about 30 minutes to realize there wasn't a single line banning temporary camping on one's own property. In fact, there was a clause that explicitly allowed reasonable recreational use, provided it didn't damage shared resources. My tent, it was 50 feet from the water, didn't leave a footprint, and blended into the trees better than most back porches in the neighborhood. I started a folder on my desktop labeled Deborah Situation. Screenshots, photos, notes on our interaction, time-stamped verbatim. Years of writing professionally had taught me one thing. You don't win arguments with noise, you win with receipts. The next morning, she doubled down. Sent me a formal warning via email. Looked like it had been written by a sitcom villain's legal intern. "Immediate compliance required," it said. And again, no citations, no statutes, just vibes. So I responded, respectfully, professionally, with exhibits, attachments, clause references. She didn't reply, but she didn't disappear either. Around 10 that morning, Sheriff's Deputy Andrews rolled into my driveway. Behind him, Deborah in that same golf cart, grinning like she'd just won HOA bingo. Andrews, to his credit, was polite. Asked for my ID, my deed, which I gave him. After a 5-minute review, he turned to Deborah and said, "Ma'am, he owns the property, and he's not violating any laws." You'd think that'd be the end of it. But with people like Deborah, it never ends. Losing doesn't make them retreat, it makes them escalate. Later that evening, one of my neighbors texted me a screenshot from the community forum. Deborah had posted a dramatic alert titled, "Urgent, Security and Property Value Concerns," calling me a squatter and a dangerous precedent. She even attached grainy, zoomed-in photos of my tent, taken from behind a bush like she was filming a nature documentary on criminal wildlife. Her post went semi-viral, at least in HOA terms. Some people jumped in to support her. Others started asking, "Wait, isn't that his land? Or what's the actual rule here?" Deborah shut them down fast. "Don't question leadership," she said. I started to feel the pressure. People I used to wave to at the mailboxes now wouldn't make eye contact. It got to me more than I'd like to admit. One night, around midnight, I almost packed up the tent. I had the poles in my hand, halfway done. But then I stopped, looked out at the lake. the moonlight on the water, and remembered why I came here in the first place. I didn't buy this land to win popularity contests. I bought it for peace. And I wasn't about to let a self-appointed lawn sheriff take that from me. Things boiled over the following Monday. Deborah called an emergency HOA meeting. I showed up with a flash drive full of documents and a calm heart. She showed up with blown-up photos of my tent on foam board like we were in court. Called me a threat to community cohesion. She said, if we allow this, what's next? RVs? Tiny homes? Tents with people in them? The room was dead silent when she finished. Then I stood up, plugged my flash drive into the projector, showed the clause in the HOA rules that supported my setup, walked them through my documentation, kept my voice steady, my tone neutral. No attacks, just facts. People listened, heads nodded. And that's when Deborah snapped. You don't get it, she yelled. We're expecting a VIP government visit next week. If they see your tent, the whole thing falls apart. Dead silence. Turns out, the whole crusade wasn't about aesthetics or rules. It was about control. About Deborah positioning herself as queen bee before a mysterious government official showed up for some community tour. My tent, it threatened her fantasy. The room turned cold. People started filing out. One lady muttered, all this over a photo op? I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 2 days later, sirens woke me up. Sheriff, fire truck, hazmat team. I'm not joking. An actual hazmat team rolled up to my tent like I was running a meth lab in the woods. They said they got a tip about chemical odors, environmental risk. They found bug spray, coffee, a propane camp stove. That's it. Deputy Andrews came back. Said, Mr. Callahan, I'm sorry. This was clearly a false report. We'll be pursuing charges for misuse of emergency services. And who filed the call? You guessed it. Deborah. Again. She showed up mid-inspection, expecting to see me cuffed. Instead, she saw the fire chief shaking my hand and the hazmat guys packing up. Her face crumbled like wet cardboard. But it wasn't over yet. Because here's the twist. That same day, I call my sister. Her husband works in government logistics. When I told him the name of the lake and what had been happening, he went silent for a second. Then he said, Ryan, that exact spot, the one where your tent is, was chosen by our security team for a confidential meeting with a state official. You weren't in the way. You were part of the plan. Turns out, they picked my property because it was secluded, quiet, privately owned. They'd even asked for no attention, no welcome banners, no HOA drama. And Deborah, with her campaigns, her meetings, her hazmat stunts, she turned the safest site into a red flag nightmare. On the day of the visit, a line of black government SUVs drove right past her little welcome dignitaries display, balloons, podium, and all, and pulled straight in my driveway. I watched her from across the lake, standing there, jaw wide open, her whole plan unraveling in real time. One of the agents stepped out, shook my hand, smiled, and said, loud enough for her to hear, thanks for keeping things low-key, Ryan. This spot's perfect. And in that moment, standing beside the tent she tried so hard to erase, I didn't feel angry. I just felt peaceful, like the lake had won. So, here's the takeaway. Sometimes the best way to deal with bullies isn't yelling back. It's outlasting them with patience, paperwork, and a little poetic justice. If you've ever dealt with an HOA power trip or seen someone weaponize rules for personal gain, drop a comment below. Who was right? Who went too far? And where's the line between order and obsession? Let's talk.